Welcome to the Unshakable Foundation meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Tony Zed, who's come along to share on the topic of a quick journey to power for up to 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for the Q&A portion of the meeting. Tony, thanks so much for coming. It's over to you.
Did that mistake yesterday. Thank you, Ella. Tony, recovered alcoholic. And real quick, just bear with me a couple of seconds here. Dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about these 12 steps, these 12 traditions, and these 12 concepts. And you, God, and the fellowship of AA, so I can have a new experience with all these things. Help me to see the truth. Please put the love in my heart and the words in my mouth. Amen. Woohoo! Thank you, Young, for asking me to speak. And I have no clue what I'm going to say, but it's a quick journey to power. I'm going to give you my experience, and I have a ton of it. I came into AA in 1990. I didn't get sober to 2007. At one point, I had a sobriety date of 1990 to 1998, and I want to talk about that really quick, and I'll make it really quick. I came into the New York City Police Department. I was a New York City cop at the time. I was running the streets of New York in the 80s, totally insane, doing whatever the hell I want, and it talks about this, I developed this ego, right? You see, I'm above the law, right? And Bill W. talks about it on page 2. I commenced to forge the weapon, the ego, that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons, right? Between drinking and me running around with a badge and a gun and bopping people over the head with my nightstick and making arrests and just developing this ego that's just so huge, And, my friend T, he talks about, you could get an alcoholic to stop drinking, but you could never get an alcoholic to stop playing God, right? And it's so true, and that's what almost killed me, And I come in 1990 and to the New York City Police Department, and I'm going to meetings, and I'm not drinking, and I'm showing up to meetings, and that's all I'm doing. Just total abstinence, right? And I'm living, not on page 52. My best page is page 66. It's called the death page. I'm living on that page, right? About what happens is, guys, my disease goes dormant, right? It goes dormant, right? Human power does work, right? Up to a point. Human power works. Human power is a finite power, right? What this book is talking about is the infinite power. All you could get, there is no cap to it. A finite power, there's a cap to it. I hit a point, at some point it stops working. It's like medication, You give someone medication and they'll take it for 5-6 years, and then the medication stops working because the body gets used to it. And it's the same way with just the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, I'm hanging out in a 3-part solution, right? Just doing one part. I'm doing one part, and I'm expecting the results of the other 2 parts, right? And it's just not working. So I'm hanging out, and I start experiencing something called untreated alcoholism, and we live life forward. We understand it backwards. I look back, and I had no clue what untreated alcoholism was. My disease goes underground and pops up in other places, like cheating on my wife. Right? Never done anything. Never, ever done anything like that, right? You see, you take the booze away from me and the drugs away from me, and I have to replace it with something else. You see, if my alcoholism needs to be fed. This thing called the beast needs to be fed, and if I don't feed it with either my character defects or booze and drugs, or God, the steps in helping others, it's going to feed itself. It's coming, and that's what it did. It started feeding itself to my defects, right? And that was one of the most obvious ones, right? And then gambling, right? I was never a gambler. I'm betting. I'm making $700-800 a week. I'm betting $1,000 a game. Like it's insane, right? just things like that, things that, just I want some pleasure in my life, right? But meanwhile, I got a house. I got everything I asked for. I got a house. I got a wife. I got a kid. I got two brand new cars, right? But it's still not good enough. You see, I just can't feel like you guys call it that hole in the soul, right? I'm always, looking for something more. I'm always looking for, what's on the other side of the fence. The grass is always greener over there until you get there. So, so about 5 years in, I started experiencing this stuff, right? I would talk to you in bumper stickers, one day at a time, pray, I would know every single, like, slogans and all that stuff. And I knew nothing. I knew nothing of how to stay sober. I was just abstinent. And I'm sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, living the double life. You see, there's a certain reputation I want you to know about me. I don't want you to find me out. And that's part of that self-centered fear that I find out that I have from coming to AA this time. What you think of me is the most important thing. So I could be in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And a newcomer was sitting next to me. I would get up, because I was scared that they would ask me to sponsor them. Right? I was petrified. Anyway, so make a long story short, my wife finds out about all my finagling and stuff like that. And she goes, I have to protect my child. She was 100% she was 100% right. And back then, of course, she's she's a BIT, whatever, and she leaves, and the resentment is set. She left me, and it only took about 10 months after. And that's why I don't demonize alcohol, because I'm sitting in an empty house one day, and I decide maybe to show her, like, typical resentment, to show her that she was wrong, I'm gonna blow my brains out, right? And thank God alcohol came back into my life. Thank God I picked up a drink. Alcohol is the solution to my problem, but the only thing, it's a human power, and it works. And thank God I picked up alcohol. That's why I don't demonize alcohol. And then alcohol turns around and backstabs me again. It gets me to a place of surrender. It gets me to a place where I make a plea out to God. I don't even know I'm making this plea out to Him. So alcohol is I respect alcohol. So, I pick up a drink. I'm back on and guess what happens, guys? My alcoholism progressed, right? It progresses. I didn't notice. It's progressive, incurable, and it's fatal, right? I'm gonna read something here. Let me read page 66. Let me tell you what happened. And in this one paragraph, it'll sum up my whole 8 years of sobriety. It says, it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. What are the hours worthwhile? How about helping others? Right? It takes me right out of helping others. Right? I still live on this page today. I read this page all the time, because what keeps me from helping others? You see, without you, there is no me. What keeps me separated from this power is this right here, right? On page 66. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. It'll kill me, drunk or sober, right? We found that it is fatal. But when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit, and the insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And for us, to drink is to die. And not just die a physical death, die a spiritual death. Because once I put alcohol into my body, all this work, I'm sober my sobriety date is November 27, 2000. I'm sober 18 years. As soon as I put alcohol into my body, that's all gone. Done. I revert right back to this thing called alcoholism. I revert right back. So I'm talking about the progression, right? And there's a chapter that's called Two Wives That Nobody Reads in AA, right? and and I just want to read something to you. In 1990, I came in, I would say a husband number two, right? I have all these things, Husband number two, your husband is showing lack of control. He is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. He often gets entirely out of hand and when drinking. He admits this is true, but is positive that he will do better. He has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry. Maybe he's beginning to lose his friends, right? His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried at times and is becoming aware that he cannot drink like other people. He sometimes drinks in the morning, through the day, to hold his nervousness in check. He is remorseful after serious bouts of drinking, but he wants to stop. But when he gets over the speed, he begins to think once how he can drink moderately next time. We think this person is in danger, and that's the only husband that they say this person might be in danger, right? So now I pick up a drink. I stopped drinking in 1990. I come in a husband number two, and on the page more about alcoholism, page 30, it says that our disease gets worse, never better, right? So 8 years of not drinking, I turn into a husband number four. How the hell does that happen? Right? There's that strange mental twist that we don't know what the hell's going on. So the next page, I turn into a husband number four, right? You may have a husband, right? Because at the end of this spree, right, from 98 to 2007, I have been to 9 rehabs already. 9. Think about 9. You see, I'm coming back to the fellowship, and the fellowship has power, but it's not sufficient power to keep a drunk like me sober. I developed into a chronic alcoholic overnight. Is that crazy? And that's my experience, guys. You may have a husband who you completely despair. This is me when I came in my last rehab. He has been placed in one institution after another. He is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. Sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. Perhaps he has had delirium tremors. Doctors may shake their heads and advise you may have him committed. Maybe you have already been obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Wow. Why? Many of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well. I truly believe the deeper the surrender, the better the recovery. That's just my experience. At that point, when I came in 2007, I was drinking. I did a 6-month stint of crack. I never done crack before. Thank God for crack. Crack got me right down to the bottom, right? Look, somebody's calling me. Can you guys still hear me? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. So crack gets me down to this place of desperation, right? Keep calling. Jesus. I don't know how to do that thing where you can't get calls. So let's talk about that day when I come in, right? So now I progressed. I progressed to an alcoholic that only a spiritual experience is going to conquer. That's the point I wanted to make. Right? I come in. I'm on the George Washington Bridge. I'm ready to jump off. I'm being a little drama queen because we alcoholics have to be drama queens, right? And then I get this thought. Right? I get this thought. Call this guy Steve, who's always been calling. Right? He was a big book guy, a guy I avoided, right? But he was always checking on me. Right? I call him up. He picks up the phone. It's 4:30 in the morning on a Wednesday, and he picks up the phone. He has caller ID, and he goes, Tony, it's 4:30 in the morning. Life must be great. I start laughing. He starts laughing. I'm crying meanwhile, He says, what's going on, buddy? You know what? The man didn't say, Tony, you'll get me drunk before I get you sober. He didn't say that. He didn't say, hey, Tony, you know what? You've been drinking. Call me when you're sober. He didn't say that. He knew what the responsibility statement of Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, come on over to my house. I'll put a pot of coffee on. Think about that. He's inviting a drunk to his house at 4:30 in the morning. I go over to his house and I start calling all these rehabs. And the first rehab I call, I already been there 3 times. They said, Tony, we can't help you. You've already been here 3 times. The second rehab I call, they said, Tony, you already been here 3 times. The third one I called, he says, Tony, you've been to my spot in Long Island. You know what? I just opened up a new spot down in Florida. I'll send you down there, and we'll charge your insurance up here. Beautiful. Meanwhile, that New York City Police Department job I never told you, they ended up retiring me because of my drinking. They couldn't deal with me no more. They couldn't, after 8 rehabs, they said there's nothing we could do. We're gonna give you a stipend. It wasn't, and I lost so much money, out of my retirement, but I still got something. They could have fired me, but they didn't. Anyway, and I retired after 17 years on the job. Anyway, so I go down to this rehab down in Florida. I do a 6-day, 7-day detox. I come out, and a man shows up with the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. 55 people there, and he does what this book is talking about on page 18. Exactly, but I didn't know it then. I know it now. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. He sits down. He opens up the doctor's opinion, right? That the same man who is making this approach, he approached me. I didn't approach him, right? Had the same difficulty, and he obviously knows what he is talking about. He opens up to XXVIII, right? I'm going to be popping all over this book. He goes, Tony, I sit with you here. He goes, by me telling you my story, I get to stay sober today. I said, cool. Fire away. And he says, Tony, if you're anything like me, I got this thing called analogy. And he reads this. We believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action on the alcohol in these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of analogy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to the class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker, that these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form. Once having formed the habit, found that they cannot break, and once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them, and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. Bingo. He says, once I put alcohol into my body, I can't tell you the amount I'm going to take. Then he goes, I got this other thing called the mental obsession. That being away from booze for a week, a month, a couple of months, a year, I got this thought that's so strong it makes me believe a lie. Because I love the effect produced by alcohol. My mind will get me right back and will tell me any kind of lie to get me back to that ease and comfort. And he goes, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And it makes sense. I love Diet Pepsi. I can't drink 24 Diet Pepsis. I hate the taste of beer, but I could drink 24 in a couple of hours. So I'm not drinking for the taste. I'm drinking for the effect. The sensation is elusive that while they admit it's injurious, they cannot, after time, differentiate the truth from the false. I'm in delusion. That whole first step is all about delusion, right? I keep thinking that I could stay sober on self-reliance. I'm going to skip down to to the next page. On the other hand, as strange as this may seem, to those who don't understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems, he had despair ever solving them, suddenly finds himself able to control his desire for drinking. The only effort necessary being that he required to follow a few simple rules. You know what a few simple rules are, guys? Unity, service, and recovery. Not just the 12 steps. Again, if I just do one part of a 3-part solution and expect the results of the other 2, I will drink again. I need to do all 3 parts. Hold on one second. Gotta shut this door. Thank you. So my first time I have an informed first step. I know what the hell I'm suffering from. You see, I find that I'm suffering from an illness that only a spiritual experience is going to conquer. Lack of power is my dilemma, not lack of a girlfriend, not lack of money, not lack of a job, lack of power. Now I need to get the power as quickly as possible. quickly as possible because there's a small window of opportunity for a guy like me. You see, I can't let that ego rebuild itself because once the ego starts rebuilding itself, I'm screwed. Right? It'll talk me out of anything. Right? And you know what I found out, guys? As I go through this book, guess who's going through the book with me? My ego. So it's already manipulating ways of how to come back at me, right? Because he's studying the book with me, right? It makes sense. That's why this is not an overnight matter. It's something that I have to do every day. So go to page 44. And that's where we qualify drunks, right? To one who feels he is an atheist or an agnostic, such an experience is impossible. But to continue this means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. That's me, right? To be doomed to alcoholic death or live life on a spiritual basis are not always alternatives to face. So we turn that statement and we ask the newcomer the same thing he asked me, right? Do you want to die an alcoholic death or do you want to live a spiritual life? And this is not the only place they put this in the book, right? Where else? Oh, page 25, right? If you're seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and we have passed into the region from which there is no return to human aid, right? At this point, I exhausted everything humanly possible in my life, and I came to that point. I was screwed. I get to a place of screwed. There's no other, like you guys always say, it's the last house on the block, right? With the lights on. Through human aid, we have but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation, blotting out, staying in delusion, blotting out, right? As the best we could, or the other is to accept spiritual help. What's my choice, right? Another place they asked me this, right? Where? ABCs, right? That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, check, right? That probably no human power could relieve the alcoholism, check, right? That God could and would if he was sought. It isn't, I get crazy when I hear the people say, I can, he can, so I let him. I don't let nobody. I got to seek God. It is I let him. I have to seek him. And it's through these 12 steps that I seek him. It's through spiritual actions that I seek him. But yet, when I'm going through this, I had no clue what I was doing. I just followed directions because I was screwed. I get to a place of screwed, right? So we get to this part. Where's here it is, page 53. We call this the second step proposition. I'm sitting down with my sponsor, my friend Steve at this time, and we're going through this book, and he asks me the question. When we became alcoholics, crushed by the self-imposed crises, we could not postpone or evade. We had to freely face the proposition that God is everything or he is nothing. God is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? And he asked me that question. And I said, come on, Steve. That's a bit much. He looked at me and he shut the book. And at this point, I have been home 40 days from my rehab. I had joined the group, and in that group, they gave me the key, right? I had to open up every day, And at this point, he goes, all right, this is what I want you to do, Tony. When you go back to your home group, I want you to help somebody every day. And another thing, he gave me another thing. He told me, he gave me an assignment. Don't talk about yourself so much, Tony. When you meet someone, talk about them. Ask them about their family. Ask them about them. How are they doing? I didn't know what the hell he was doing, but I just followed directions. Next day, guys, how God works, right? God sends this guy from off the streets, and the guy needed a ride to the soup kitchen. He goes, could you give me a ride to the soup kitchen? 40 people in the meeting. He asks me. Go figure. So I give him a ride. He comes the next day. Give him a ride. Next day, he comes with another guy. I'm taking two guys to the soup kitchen after every meeting. These guys, they're not staying sober. They smell like beer. They smell like liquor. But I'm taking them. And I understand. We live life full. We understand it backwards. I understand those people were there for me. I mean, I'm so selfish. That's why I think, right? They're there for me. Anyway, 3 weeks in, I have this unbelievable, I call it a white light experience. I'm sitting down having my own lunch, and I get this unbelievable feeling of gratitude, something I've never had before. I start crying like a little bitch. I called my sponsor up. I said, Steve, I'm here. I don't know what's going on. There's tears coming down, but it's tears of joy. And he goes, you tapped into the power, Tony. He sounds like Yoda. You tapped into the power. I said, what do you mean? He goes, that's what God feels like. That's what he says. There goes your conception of God. I was like, oh. And he tells me, and then he gave me that warning on page 66. What's your hope now? Your hope is the maintenance and growth of that spiritual experience. I said, what do you mean? He says, we got to finish the steps, Tony. We got to finish the steps. Your God is in place. It's in the seeking, not in the finding. It's in the trusting and relying. It's not in the finding. That man was so smart. He knew that the ego needed to be smashed just a little bit so I could tap into this power. You see, me reading this book without any action did no good for it did nothing for me. So I got this feeling, at that point I knew that God had done for me what I couldn't do for myself. I knew that God had placed me in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I no longer started saying, my best thinking got me here. I stopped taking God's credit. Now I started saying that I was separated from booze, that God had done it, and truly believed it at this point. So we go on and we do a third step prayer. And then he tells me, he goes to page after our third step prayer. He reads this to me. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, which is the third step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous effort to face and get rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. So I go, what do you mean by that? He handed me a marble notebook with a pencil, and he says, here, start writing. That's what I mean by that. We got to find the things that are blocking you off to this power. Because on page 55, it says that we were fooling ourselves. Right? I'm in delusion. I'm fooling myself. That deep down in every man, woman, and child is this idea of God, but I'm blocked off by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things. And have to search fearlessly to get to that power. You see, Bill W. on page 12, he had that same experience, that I had. He had a white light experience in the hospital, but he has another experience on page 12. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment I had and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came, right? But soon the sense of his presence was blotted out by what? Blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within himself. And so it had been ever since. How blind I have been. You see, I still get blocked off. I could have periods of spiritual experiences, but I still could get blocked off to this power. See, I needed access to this grace. I needed to stay in connection with this grace. And it's through steps 4 through 9 that I get this access and this connection to grace. And then steps 10, 11, and 12 keep me in connection with this grace. I show up with a fourth step, the best possible fourth step I could write at the time. Still untreated, right? I'm still coming there with an untreated mind. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just following direction. I sit down and we start talking in the fifth step. First time I in that fifth step, I experienced something called humility. Why do I do a fifth step? And the first reason, let me go to page 72. Why do I do a fifth step? Let me get to page 72. I'm all over this book. The best reason first, right? On page 72. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking, right? That's why I'm doing a fifth step, right? This is where I find out my defects, guys. My fifth step. This is how I find out the things that are blocking me off to this power, so I could get free of it. So God could get me free of it. Page 75. After I finished my fifth step. And this is exactly what happened. I was floating. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of. This is our fifth step promises. Twist of character. Uh, every cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, we're holding nothing. We are delighted. We can look at the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. What was my fear? The fear of doing a ninth step. This fifth step pushed me right into my ninth step. When I did 6 and 7, he says, Tony, don't. We're going to read 6 and 7. On 6 it says, are you okay? Are you now ready to let God remove all these things which you have admitted as objectable? Right? Yes. All these defects, I'm willing to have God remove them. Right? And then in the 7th-step prayer, right? God get I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows, / then I put my defects in there. And I'm asking God not only to remove my defects, but give me the strength, inspiration, and direction to practice the opposite. Right? That's in my 7th step. That's it. That's it. No more. You have to work on myself. God works on me. He goes, Tony, if you want to do a perfect 6 or 7, go out and do your reparations in 8, 9. Go out and do your corrective measures for all the shit you've done. You see, in that 5th step, I find out, that the people around me get to experience alcoholism without even picking up a drink. I get to see it for the first time. My little daughter, I make her a liar. She's telling her friends at school her daddy was with her on the weekend, and meanwhile, I never showed up. I was a no-call, no-show. I make her a liar. Right? I make her. She gets to experience alcoholism without picking up a drink. I don't see that. And how do I find out more? When I go out and I start making my amends at 9. Oh my God. I was so delusional. I had no clue I was hurting people around me. I had no clue I was hurting my family when I sat them down and I gave them the opportunity to tell me how they felt. I had no clue. You see, 9 out of 10 times the unexpected happens. What they're talking about there is what I expect is going to happen isn't going to happen because I think I know what's going to happen in the amends, and when I show up, it's totally unexpected, or what I expected. So I go through the first 9 steps, and I have this. I've got connection to the grace, right? After the first 9 steps, I'm on fire with this work, right? I'm starting to sponsor people. You know what was great that what my sponsor did? He goes, Tony, now I have to wean you off of me. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you can call me your sponsor, but your reliance isn't on me anymore. You have a connection to a power. You have a connection to God. Your reliance is on God now. Let's go to page 98. Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. Just as it is so. In some cases, the wife would never come back for one reason or another. A little bit of humor. Whenever we read that, I always say that's the greatest promise of the book. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. That's a little big book. Anyway, remind the prospect, right? Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people, right? It is dependent upon his relationship with God. And that's exactly what he did with me. He reminded me that. You see, my relationship is not, my sobriety or my recovery is not dependent on my sponsor anymore. I have a relationship with God. Now it's dependent on God. He says, you can use me to 10 steps. You can use me. And I thank God he did that for me because there were times when he wasn't available. I needed to go to God. So I get rocking into the 4th dimension, right? I'm on this rocket ship. Now I need fuel for the rocket ship. I need to stay on the rocket ship. I need to stay connected. Step 10, right? I love step 10 in our book, right? It gives us some great promises, right? You know, and the thing is that, in step 10, they're asking me to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, to watch before I actually commit the crime, right? You see, steps 10, 11, and 12. I heard a speaker say one time, the first 9 steps is just 10% of the program. 90% of the program is steps 10, 11, and 12. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I'm not big into statistics, but I like that. And that's step 10. I get connected to something called the vital sixth sense. So in my fourth and fifth step, I see where my 5 senses are already, that self-will gone right. I'm the extreme example of self-will gone right. My instincts gone awry, right? I see that in my fourth and fifth step. Right? That's for my 5 senses. Now God installs this vital sixth sense. He said, you guys know what I'm talking about. Whenever you do something that's not according, the alarm goes off. Oh man, I gotta make amends. I gotta go do that walk of shame and go back and make amends. I hate that. So instead of doing the walk of shame, we watch for these things. In the 12 and 12, they talk about restraint of pen and tongue, right? That's the biggest thing. My mouth, right? My mouth gets me in a whole lot of trouble. We get the pause. God is in the pause, like they say. And then, step 10 pushes, of course, it's step 10 and 11 go together. I like to say it's like 6 and 7. These are disciplines to keep me on a purpose. And that's step 12, right? That's my purpose, to practice these principles in all my affairs. Because if I'm practicing selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, I'm not going to be practicing, love, tolerance. It just doesn't. You see, I can't worship two masters. I can't worship me and I can't worship God at the same time. It just can't. It just doesn't happen. The only place I could experience this power called God is right here, right now. And the things that take me out of right here, right now is the future, right? Fear, or fear, anxiety, worry, and the past, guilt, shame, and remorse, right? If I'm running around with some guilt, shame, and remorse about some amends that I didn't make, guess what? It pulls me out of right here and right now. So steps 10 or 11 is I walk with God all day long. I walk with God all day long. I'm constantly talking to God. God is everything in my life today. I could honestly, with conviction, tell you, God is everything in my life today. Any kind of big decision, I go into meditation, I ask God. He tells me no sometimes, and I'm human. I go, maybe he doesn't mean that. But guess what? Every single time I'm on page 60, I'm always in collision with something or somebody when I go across this power called God. And I'll tell you, spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. You know what? I like to say spiritual progress is spiritual perfection because you know what? It keeps me in relationship with my Father. On page 133, talks about it. I'm just jumping around all over the place, you know. But it's clear that we made our own misery, right? This is me making my own misery. God didn't do it. Avoid then the deliberate manufacturing of misery. I wish I could, but sometimes I don't, right? But if trouble comes away, we cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate his omnipotence. This is where I get the opportunity to demonstrate how God works in my life when trouble comes. God never brings the storm. He gets me through it. When all else fails, work with another alcoholic to save the day. That always gets me back connected to God. You see, without you, there is no me. Guaranteed. Step 12 is funny. On page 89, from page 89 to page 103, they talk a different language, working with others. Now they start to say, before that they would say we. Now, because of the first 11 steps, I've had a spiritual experience. Now they start to say you, right? Different language, right? Because now I have the power. Now I have to transmit this power, right? I can't transmit something I ain't got. And it's a practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall, right? Practice, practice, practice. How do we get better? How do we become better 12-steppers? Practice, practice, practice. You see, I found out AA is not a self-help program. It's an others help program. I help you, I get better. I help you, I stay in grace. I don't I don't go to rehabs, detoxes, Salvation Armies, and carry this message, turn pages with newcomers because I want God to give me grace. I'm already grace. I believe everybody's grace. Everyone's the same. Right? But how much do I have to see? Right? And give me one more minute. You see, God gives me great gift of sobriety. And God does for me what I can't do for myself. But there's another part there. There's a price that has to be paid. And the price is that, I have to keep smashing the ego. Because what happens is if I stop doing this thing, I revert to my default. I revert to selfishness, self-centeredness. God never takes the grace away. I do. If I stop working and stop doing what he wants me to do, to stop playing the role that he assigns for me. And when I stop those things, I revert right back to that self-centeredness, and I end up on page 66. So, Young, thank you for letting me share. Lack of power was my dilemma, not no more today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony. Always good to hear you, brother. My name's Young, recovered addict. Quick question. You mentioned about amends, and you mentioned that part in the book where it says in 9 times out of 10, the unexpected happens. Can you give us an example of when the unexpected happened during an amends that you made? Thanks, Tony.
So you guys know I do security, right? So I make an amends for this is a funny one. You guys are gonna laugh. I do a job for this guy, and he goes, "Tony, if you're sober," and I said, "Yes." I'm out in Long Island at this place where they have factories. I had to watch a factory. I was in a security van, 10 months sober, nobody around, no one for miles. A girl comes walking by. It's like the Alaskan snow cap, that story on page 101. Anyway, this girl comes by and we strike up a conversation. She's pretty. So she goes, "Oh, there's a Bennigan's about a mile down the road. Would you like to have a beer with me?" I said, "Sure." I'm 10 months sober. I said, "Sure." She gets in the van. We go down there. We end up getting sloshed. Next morning, the owner of the factory sees me in the car with this lady. We're half dressed. Right? It wasn't pretty. My friend almost loses a multi-million-dollar contract because of me, because I got drunk with this girl. So I go back and I make amends to him. I got about 8 months sober. So this is back in 2007. So I make amends to him, and he goes, "Okay." And I said, "How can I make this right?" He goes, "Okay, you have to work for me 2 days for free." This is what he says. He forgives me. He didn't lose his contract. Months go by. Now we're in 2008. I don't know if you guys, I live in the Bronx, so Yankee Stadium was going to be, the old Yankee Stadium was going to be crushed. So, they're going to remove it. They're going to make a new Yankee Stadium, but they're going to have an all-star game. So I'm looking at the tickets because I wanted to go to the all-star game because I'm a Yankee fan. So the tickets were like $1,000 a ticket for the worst possible tickets. So I was like, I'm not gonna go. The night before, this guy calls me up. He goes, "Tony, I'm in a bind." This is like 6, 7 months, 8 months. He goes, "I'm in a bind. Somebody at the All-Star game that I had working there got fired. Would you like to work?" I get to go to not Young. He gets crazy. So I get to not only work the All-Star game, I'm on the field. And they're doing the national anthem, and I'm crying like a little woman, like a girl, right? Because it's like a total spiritual experience. All because I made that amends 8 or 7 months ago. right? Can't make this shit up. People are looking at me like this guy must really love his country, right? But yeah, I'm crying like a baby only because I'm on the field young. How does that happen? 9 out of 10 times the unexpected happens. That's
Lovely.
one of my unexpected.
Sorry, Tony. Thanks, Young, for your question. Next up, we got Michael. Come on in.
Hi, Michael, record out. Thanks, Emma, for sharing, and thank you, Tony, for your share. I really, really enjoyed it. I was going to ask you what your favorite promise was in the book, but you touched on that. So thanks for sharing. So my question would be, when you regards to you were talking about 10, 11, being the higher percentage of the work. What lesson did God teach you from your last step 10? And also it's a two-part question. What have you done, in say the last 24 hours to improve your conscious contact with God? And yeah, thanks again, Tony, very much.
So my favorite promise this is on page 132. It's very short. We have recovered and given the power to help others. Love that. My last step 10 was I don't know if I don't know if I shared this before here or somewhere else, but I know I shared it. But if about a couple of weeks ago, I'm coming home from work. I've done a 16-hour tour, two 8-hour tours, and I just wanted a sausage sandwich, a sausage and egg sandwich. 6:30 in the morning. There's a new deli in my neighborhood, and I walk in. I give me a sausage and egg. He goes, "Oh, we don't have sausage and egg. We have turkey sausage." I said, "Turkey is not sausage. I just sausage and egg, please." He says, "No, we don't have that here." So I said, "Where's the owner?" The owner comes over. I talk to the owner. I said, "Why don't you have a sausage here?" He goes, "Well, because of our religious beliefs, we don't sell sausage here." So I'm like, because of your now, Mr. Spiritual here, I go just ballistic. Because of your religious beliefs, I can't have a sausage and egg sandwich. That's bullshit, right? The rattle comes out, and the pacifier. I say a few more choice words and I leave. As soon as I walk outside that door, that vital sixth sense goes off. Beep. Meanwhile, I'm texting someone, right, from the program. And I say, guess what I just did? And she's laughing. She goes, you know what you have to do? I said, yeah, I know I have to go back. So I went home and I changed and I came back and he sees me now. He's like petrified. He sees I've changed and maybe I'm coming back. You see, in the Bronx, if you're coming back, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. You're going to get stabbed or shot. He looks at me and said, listen, I come back and I just, and even though in the amends it says we don't say we're sorry, it doesn't fit the bill. Doesn't. But I told him I was sorry. And I said, my actions and my behavior was, unbecoming. And is there anything I could do to make things right? And he's looking at me and he's wondering, what the hell's wrong with this guy? 15 minutes ago, he's ready to blow, like beat me up. And he comes, and then 15 minutes later, he's like a creep up. He must think I have bipolar or something. Anyway, he goes, no. And he goes, thank you for that. But he goes, I get it all the time. And he I said, oh, really? And he goes, so anyway, but what happened out of that whole exchange, right? That was my last 10 step that I could remember, right? Out of that whole exchange. Now I have a relationship with this guy. When I walk by, I say hi, and he says hi to me, He goes, come on in. He wants to give me a free cup of coffee. And I'm like, no, I'm going to bed right now. I'm going to work. Just coming home. So, because of this exchange, I have a new friend. And what was the other question?
I feel greedy now. It was just to ask what have you done recently to improve your conscious contact with God, like as it says in step 11.
To improve my conscious, I do. Every morning I do the same thing. I ask. What I do is I ask God, what can I do for you? I stop asking God for things. And it says that it doesn't work. It says it on page 80, whatever, 87 or 88. No, 87. Yeah. I don't ask God for stuff. I don't even ask God to keep me sober today. He's already done that. I said, God, what knucklehead are you gonna put in my life? Who, show me, some spiritual fill-up stations where I can be of service to other people. How can I be of service to you? And that's been working, for almost 18 years now. How I improve is like, I try to stay awake to those opportunities. Sometimes, and again, spiritual progress rather spiritual perfection. Sometimes, I could go right by those signposts. What to improve is like I try to stay awake. And what happens is when I have the spiritual narcolepsy, it's mostly because I'm thinking about my little plans and decides or some kind of little problem that I got going on. And to say that it doesn't happen it's insane. Like I'm always awake? Hell no. Yeah. So I try to stay awake to improve that conscious contact with God. Because the most important thing in my life is that connection to grace. If I lose that connection, I'm screwed. It might not come at me by drinking. It might come at me as all kinds of absurd actions, right? I start getting into some crazy actions, and it all starts there. And it just draws me away from the grace because, again, my ego is looking to detach me from the power always. That's all I got. Thanks for letting me share.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Michael, for your question. And finally, we've got Andy. Come on in.
Tony, I'm so glad that I was able to finally track you down. You're speaking everywhere. They're making you speaker boy. Be careful. I take notes, man, and I got 2 pages here. I mean, who was it that said that Bill made his living at first by talking fast to people who listen slow? And I think I listen a little slow now. But one thing, and then I realized I can actually just come back and listen to this thing again because it's so great it was recorded. But the thing you said about the book going from the we to the you, I have never heard that. It's fascinating. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Well, I mean, it's self-explanatory, Andy. It's like, the first 11 steps prepare me to go and do working with others, right? That's the hope. And then working with others is, yesterday I spoke on step 12, and that was unexpected. I didn't think it was on step 12, but, I did, hold up. Okay, practical experience shows that nothing will show so much immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. That's the whole purpose of the 12 steps, right? You see, I always thought AA was a self-help program. This working with others tells me it's an others help program. That's what keeps me connected to the power. It has not failed me yet. It's giving me direction and working with others. There's 14 and a half pages that give me directions for any kind of 12-step call that you go on. And we all know every 12-step call is totally different. There's no 12-step call the same. I mean, the way I've seen it, right? So, thank God they wrote this in, right? And the thing is that, the first 88, well, was it 88 pages plus the doctor's opinion, right? It's my training to go help others. That's the whole purpose of AA, right? What's that purpose in AA, Andy? To stay sober and help another alcoholic. Now, if it was up to me, and thank God it's not up to me, right? I would change that whole preamble, right? I would say, our primary purpose is to help another alcoholic in order to stay sober. That's what I would put, but it's not up to me. Thanks, Andy.
Lovely. Thanks, Tony, for your answers, and thanks, Andy, for your question. So it's now 8